Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into the Great Propellant Showdown. We're going to pit the top rocket fuels against each other to figure out exactly which one will ultimately fuel humanity's journey to Mars and, more importantly, get us back. While liftoffs look completely chaotic from the outside, underneath all that fire is some highly specific, finely tuned chemistry. We're breaking down the exact chemical contenders aerospace engineers are agonizing over right now, trying to find that perfect balance of power, safety, and efficiency. Here's the game plan for today. We'll start with a brief history of propellants, look at kerosene as our reliable workhorse, check out methane as the clean alternative, and introduce hybrids as the safest wildcard. Then we'll run a head-to-head efficiency showdown before wrapping up with the amazing science of actually making fuel on Mars. Section 1. A brief history of fuel, from gasoline to the space age. Okay, to truly understand the engineering trade-offs of modern rockets, we first need to look at how chemical propulsion actually evolved. It's pretty wild to think about, but back in 1926, Robert Goddard launched the first liquid-fueled rocket using a fuel most of us literally pump into our cars every day, regular gasoline. A few years later, in 1933, Soviet engineer Sergei Korolev tested the GIRD-09. This was an early hybrid rocket that used gelled gasoline and liquid oxygen. Now, fast forward to the Cold War in the 1950s, and early intercontinental ballistic missiles started using hypergolic propellants. These were highly toxic chemicals that ignited instantly on contact at room temperature. That made them super reliable to store and launch at a moment's notice, but absolutely incredibly dangerous to handle. Finally, in the 1960s, the Apollo program's massive Saturn V rocket took humanity to the moon using a highly refined kerosene known as RP-1. And honestly, that set a standard that's still huge in the industry today. Section 2. Kerosene, the reliable workhorse. Dense, cheap, and Earth-reliant. So let's talk about our first major modern contender, RP-1. This is a highly refined kerosene that has served as the absolute backbone of the launch industry for decades. It's basically highly refined petroleum, chemically super similar to standard jet fuel. And because it's a liquid at room temperature, it's incredibly safe and easy to store on the launch pad, especially compared to super chilled cryogenic fuels. Plus, its very high density is a massive advantage. It lets engineers build smaller, lighter rocket tanks while still packing a huge energetic punch to rip out of Earth's deep gravity well. But it's not all upside. There's major trade-offs here. For one, it requires lengthy and expensive refinement from crude oil just to strip out impurities like sulfur. And crucially, because kerosene is made up of these complex hydrocarbon chains containing 11 to 17 carbon atoms, it rarely burns perfectly. This incomplete combustion produces significant soot and heavy carbon deposits right inside the engine. Section 3. Methane, the clean alternative, the future of reusability. Next up is liquid methane, a fuel that is getting massive attention right now for next-generation spacecraft. Comparing kerosene and methane really brilliantly illustrates why methane is becoming the absolute favorite for reusable rockets. With kerosene, that heavy carbon soot buildup in the combustion chamber requires lengthy, expensive cleaning and refurbishment between flights. Nobody wants to be scraping soot out of an engine if they don't have to, right? But methane changes the game entirely. It burns incredibly clean, producing primarily just gaseous carbon dioxide and hydrogen. This clean-burning nature avoids all that costly downtime, enabling the fast turnaround that is absolutely essential if you want your orbital rockets to act more like airplanes. The main catch? Methane requires specialized, heavy cryogenic storage to keep it chilled in a liquid state, and that adds some serious thermal complexity to the rocket's plumbing. Section 4. Hybrids, the safest wildcard, merging liquids and solids. Now, let's introduce a really interesting wildcard into our comparison, hybrid rockets. These uniquely combine a liquid oxidizer with a solid fuel grain for a safer, controllable engine. Let's think about how this physically works. In a standard liquid propellant system, whether you're using kerosene or methane, you need incredibly complex turbopumps and really intricate plumbing just to inject and mix the liquid fuel and the liquid oxidizer into the combustion chamber. It's a mechanical nightmare. But a hybrid rocket system? The mechanical simplicity is beautiful. You have a liquid oxidizer tank feeding directly into a single solid fuel port. The fuel grain itself is totally inert without the oxidizer present. So you get the inherent safety and mechanical simplicity of a solid rocket, but because you're controlling the liquid oxidizer flow with a single valve, you can actually throttle the thrust up and down or even shut the engine down entirely. That is physically impossible with traditional solid boosters once you light them. But hey, nothing in aerospace is perfect. The major engineering hurdle for hybrids is something called the regression rate. Simply put, regression rate is the speed at which the solid fuel surface melts, evaporates, and mixes with the oxidizer over the course of a burn. In hybrid motors, this rate is typically 25% to 30% lower than in standard solid rockets. That means the fuel mixes too slowly to generate highly competitive thrust on its own. To get around this, engineers are now using 3D printing methods like fused deposition manufacturing to create complex fuel grains. We're talking things like helical ports made of ABS plastic, which dramatically increase the surface area and physically boost that regression rate. Section 5. Efficiency and Maintenance Showdown. Head-to-head data. All right, it is time for the Great Propellant Showdown. But before we crown a winner, we really have to define a vital metric here: specific impulse, or ISP. Measured in seconds, it basically calculates the thrust produced by a rocket engine per unit of propellant weight flow. The easiest way to think about specific impulse is that it's the miles per gallon rating for a rocket engine. A higher specific impulse indicates greater overall engine efficiency, meaning your rocket can travel further or carry a much heavier payload into orbit on the exact same amount of fuel. So the crucial point is right here in the numbers. Under standard atmospheric and pressure conditions, assuming an engine chamber pressure of roughly 1,000 psi, methane actually edges out kerosene in raw efficiency. Methane engines achieve approximately 299 seconds of specific impulse, compared to kerosene's 289 seconds. Now, a 10-second difference might sound pretty tiny to us here on the ground, but in orbital mechanics, even tiny fractional changes in fuel efficiency literally dictate whether a massive interplanetary mission succeeds or completely fails.
Let's summarize our findings across all three contenders. Kerosene gives you dense, room temperature power, but it punishes you with high soot buildup and complex turbopumps. Methane wins on maintenance with its clean-burning nature and slightly higher efficiency, though you do have to deal with the heavy complexities of cryogenic storage. And hybrids? Well, while they have lower overall efficiency because of those regression rate issues we just discussed, they absolutely win on mechanical simplicity and safety, basically needing only a single valve to operate cleanly.
Section 6. Making Fuel on Mars, the Off-World Gas Station. Finally, we have to solve the ultimate interplanetary problem. If we travel all the way to Mars, how do we secure enough fuel to come back home? The physics of spaceflight are incredibly unforgiving. Carrying enough dense kerosene for a return trip all the way from Earth would require absurdly heavy payloads, driving launch costs absolutely through the roof. And once you land, you're out of luck. I mean, we certainly cannot drill for dinosaur bones on the Martian surface to refine more RP1, right? Crude oil is strictly an Earthbound resource. So, we need a propellant we can make locally. This is exactly where methane acts as the ultimate off-world gas station. It utilizes a brilliant century-old piece of chemistry called the Sabatier reaction. Here's how it works in 3 really simple steps. First, you harvest local carbon dioxide, which super conveniently makes up about 95% of the Martian atmosphere. Second, you introduce a small amount of hydrogen and a methanation catalyst that you brought lightly from Earth. And third, you react them together under heat. The result? You manufacture fresh liquid methane propellant and water, right there on the alien surface. This fundamentally alters the economics of deep space travel. By offering a way to manufacture propellant locally rather than hauling it millions of miles through the void, methane just completely changes the math of becoming a multiplanetary species. Stanford University's Brian Wu hit the nail on the head when he said, methane has a clear advantage over kerosene due to the Sabatier process itself, a cost-effective and versatile option, particularly during interplanetary missions. We've covered a lot today. We've seen the reliable density of kerosene, the clean, reusable efficiency of methane, and the safe, mechanically simple promise of hybrid solid-liquid engines. Each one has its distinct and vital role in the current aerospace renaissance we're living through. But as you reflect on the incredible chemistry and engineering that powers our spacecraft, ask yourself, will humanity's interplanetary highways be paved by the clean efficiency of methane, or will a new propulsion wildcard emerge to take its place? Thank you for joining me for this explainer. I hope you found it as fascinating as I did. Keep learning and keep looking up.